Hello and welcome to Civics. My name is Michael Shea and I'm the host for this episode of Civics, a program on Arlington independent media. We like to say on this show that a noisy democracy is a healthy democracy. We like people who get involved in their community, whether it's through politics or civic activism or anything related to the community. And this show is an opportunity for the community to meet some of the people doing just that. We're joined by Terry Savela, who has been on the Planning Commission, on various commissions around the county for many years now. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, now we were talking earlier, and you've been involved since college in some kind of civic engagement, but I understand you felt a little shortchanged in high school in terms of your civics education. Can you tell us about that?
I went to public school in a rural town in a different state, not in Virginia, but it was a fairly limited curriculum that we had there. We did not have any government class, we had no public policy, we didn't have calculus, we didn't have many things. So it was a learning experience, to say the least, and no pun intended, when I got to college and discovered that people came from public school systems that were like Arlington's and had a much broader range of exposure to different types of programs in their high school careers.
Okay, so you got involved in college with some lobbying, and then you've stayed involved over the years living here in Arlington. What do you think has motivated you to be so engaged for so long?
Well, I feel very strongly about the types of progressive programs that Arlington promotes, the environmental aspects, the urban planning aspects. I've been very proud to be an Arlington resident since 1985. My volunteer activities were fairly limited for quite a few years, however, because I was working very hard. I have been a health policy analyst all of my adult life, and there have been a lot of health policy issues to work on. And I changed my work schedule several years ago and decided that I finally had time to actually get involved locally. I've been very involved in trying to promote programs and shape programs nationally and at the state level, never been involved at the local level. And I just jumped right in.
Okay, now, was one of the first things you did get involved with your civic association? The Lion Park Civic Association. So how did that come about?
Well, a funny story. I went to my very first Lion Park Citizens Association meeting back in September of 2000. I walked in and they were having their annual elections, but they had no one to run for president. I didn't know anyone in the room, and I sort of put up my hand very tentatively and asked what it entailed, and they all jumped on me and said, "Oh, you'd be a great president. Really? It isn't that much. Just sign up for it, and you'll figure it out along the way." So I signed up for it, and back in 2000 for Lion Park, the Civic Association was extremely busy. We've had so much development in Clarendon over the past decade that being president of one of the civic associations affected by all that meant you were drawn into everything. Your evening schedule was planned out for the next year.
Right. So and in Arlington, and probably a lot of places, what that means is a lot of planning reports get drafted, but only after a lot of community input, and it sounds like you were right in the middle of all that. Was there any specific planning document that came out for Clarion?
Well, after I spent 2 years as Civic Association president and got asked to join the Planning Commission, we entered into the Clarendon sector plan process. But before that, all of these site plans, all of these individual projects that you see built along the corridor involve lots of community input, lots of community meetings, discussions with the county board. It's very active.
It's very active. But now you, right in the middle of all that, is your background's not in urban planning or architecture or how did you get the knowledge you needed to be effective in a lot of that?
Well, I learned it. I studied up once I became a civic association president, I decided that I needed to know what I was talking about if I was going to be attending all of these meetings. I think it must be my natural competitive tendencies to have to know the basis for things. So I read the zoning ordinance. Not an exciting document, but I did.
Would you recommend it for people to read?
No, I would
Okay,
not.
all right.
I definitely would not recommend it. But there are much more palatable things that you can read, the sector plans and neighborhood conservation plans and those sorts of things. And the county is wonderful about putting everything out on the web. So it's very easy, actually, to become well-versed in these things if you have the inclination.
So what year was that, and what's the effect been on the community, would you say, the Clarion planning document? Is it pretty much complete now?
Oh yes, that was finished in 2005 or 6, and we've done several other sector plans around the county since then. So I've been involved in a number of them over my 10 years as planning commissioner.
Right.
And probably the largest effort that I was involved in was the Crystal City sector plan. Imagine completely replanning a built-out city, and that's what we did. Because of the BRAC closures, the county board decided that they wanted to undertake a more intensive planning exercise than simply trying to figure out how to fill up the emptying commercial office buildings. And so we started a process that ended up doing things like moving streets that have high-rise buildings right next to them, and replanning Route 1. Getting rid of the flyovers and making them into building sites. So the vision for Crystal City is going to result in a very different place in about 40 years.
Right, that's how long ahead you have to think.
Yes.
Now, being involved in this, do you find when you're just out running into people you know, or do you find people when they find out, oh, you're on that commission, and they hit you with a lot of ideas? Do you feel a little bit like a target at that time?
I think that the target practice is much more in the community meetings where you sometimes get people who come to site plan meetings, for example, and feel very threatened by the idea of change. And of course, as a planning commissioner, you have to communicate that change is going to happen.
Right.
And you can either have input and help shape that change, or you can put your head down and hope that it doesn't happen, but it will happen. Right. So I think that we are very good in Arlington at offering everyone an opportunity to participate in designing that change.
Right. Now, you've also been involved with the Transportation Commission. How did that come about, and what did you end up working on there?
Well, I was the planning commissioner who was assigned to the transportation commissioner. There's actually a seat on that commission that is a designated planning commissioner seat. So I was a dual commissioner for a few years. And during that time, we were actually developing the new master transportation plan for the county, and that was a major undertaking as well. So I participated in that. I joined the master transportation plenary group. And we had many meetings talking about bicycling and transit and pedestrians and how all of that needed to mesh in Arlington to create the livable, walkable community that we all like so much.
And just for anyone who doesn't know, to get on the Planning Commission, I assume your process was the same as a lot of people. You basically contact the county board with a letter of interest or something like that, and then you get appointed by the county board.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. You can submit your resume. I actually was approached by the county board because I had been so involved in site plan projects as a civic association president.
So looking back, what do you think maybe has been one of the biggest successes you've been involved with in a lot of these efforts?
Well, I think that there are two types of successes. I'm very proud of the long-range documents that we've put together, in particular the Crystal City Task Force, which work and the sector plan that came out of that process, because I think that was that was really striking in terms of the vision, the changes that we anticipate for Crystal City and everything that has to work together to make that happen. But on a day-to-day basis, it's the projects that I chaired as a planning commissioner, bringing them through the process. That I really enjoy looking at. Just up the road are a couple of projects that I chaired for the Planning Commission, the Clarion Center project, which is the Hard Times and Trader Joe's blocks, and the Penzance project down the block, which is now a big hole in the ground, was my final site plan as a planning commissioner. So they're nice bookends, both for my time on the planning commission and for that block.
So that's a benefit probably people don't think about if they volunteer to be on that commission. You get visible signs, reminders of something you contributed to.
Yeah, you see the results. You can think, oh, but the way that building is presents itself to the street, or that little park there, that was not anticipated in the original design, but we included that and convinced the developer along the way.
Right. So you end up working directly a lot with architects, or it's more through the developer, I suppose?
Well, the developer brings their entire team to these meetings. So you're sitting across from the architects, the civil engineers, the landscape architects, all of that. And what are some of the sort of task forces or more coalitions that you've been involved with that you can tell us about? And how did they come about? Well, I think probably the earliest one was the Small Business Task Force back in 2001 or 2002 that I participated in. I've also been on various working groups and task force associated with all of the long-range plans that we've done in the county, and I've chaired each of the 3 standing committees for the Planning Commission. Which is the Zoning Ordinance Committee. Exciting. The site plan.
Has everyone on the committee read the ordinance, do you think?
But probably not.
Okay, that is tough.
Probably not. And the Site Plan Review Committee and the Long Range Planning Committee.
The Small Business Task Force, did it have a specific purpose at the time, or?
Well, we were looking at ways to promote small business, particularly retail. And it had a Columbia Pike focus at that time. And that sort of evolved into larger planning processes. And there have been retail market studies and a variety of projects that Arlington Economic Development has undertaken to sort of continue that.
Let me ask you this, and this is a personal observation. I've been living in Arlington for 14 years. In a lot of this planning commission, is there a specific focus on restaurant development? Because I feel like in 14 years, we have become this amazing place. Whatever we're doing to foster restaurant development and variety and growth has just been a total success story to me. Has that been something that has come up a lot at the Planning Commission?
Only in the sense of when we are meeting with the developers and planning a new project, we make certain that the retail space is built out to accommodate restaurants. Okay. So we always insist on black pipe and ceiling heights of a certain level and space to allow for kitchen space and that sort of thing. So I think it's easy for a new restaurant entrepreneur to come in and find a space that can accommodate them.
Because as far as I know, I don't think anyone has analyze that or made a success story of it, but to me that's just on a personal level a great success story.
Although I do regret losing all of those wonderful little Vietnamese restaurants that we had in Clarendon at one time.
Yes, that is something that I remember that, going back even to the 1980s or beyond. Yeah, when I wasn't living in Arlington, we would make the trip out to Clarendon to go to one of the many Vietnamese restaurants. Those were quite fun.
Yeah, and that actually is a bit of a struggle for us, for county staff and for the Planning Commission, because as these new buildings come up, simply because of the cost and the financing requirements, the lease rates are much, much higher. So that small ethnic restaurant that got by on a shoestring but made wonderful food can no longer stay there. They can't afford the $50 per square foot.
And there hasn't been an explosion of food trucks to make up for that, I guess.
No,
around
there
the county.
there have been some.
There's been some, but I don't think we're as effusive in that way as
Not
DC.
yet.
Yeah, not yet. I guess that's part. Okay, that's part of the future. All right.
Part of it is accommodating parking. I think that's
Right.
that's a big issue.
And then we'll come around to the Transportation Commission and all. So you've been at the center of all this for quite a while in many ways. Okay, so you've been at this for a long time. Who are some of the people that maybe have inspired you to put in the time and read that zoning ordinance?
Well, I have to say, and this is going to sound corny, but probably the primary person who has inspired me is my husband, who has been a volunteer since I first knew him. For 30 years, he has been spending all of his time on environmental issues, even though professionally that's not his field. And he's been very committed. And I've seen him work hard on projects and initiatives, and sometimes lose and just let it roll right off him, and he gets back up and he continues volunteering and working in environmental issues. And I found that very inspiring.
And do both of you find that you're both running out to a lot of meetings, and it's a lot of you got to support each other in that whole? Yeah.
Exactly. There's always a lot of negotiation. What time can we eat dinner? Are we going to be able to have dinner together tonight? And what time do you have to leave the house? And what time do you think you'll be back? So, yes, it's at the beginning of every week we map that out.
Oh, well, that's a good system, but it works. I mean, obviously, you've had a full-time career, profession, and as you say, worked a lot of hours at times on it, and as has he, but you've both been able to find the time to put in a fair number of volunteer hours back toward the community. So that's very commendable.
Thank you.
So do you have any ideas about, because Arlington County is the kind of a place where a lot of people do get involved, but a lot of people don't, I guess. Do you have any ideas about ways the county could maybe make it easier for people or promote even more civic activism?
Well, I suppose one thing is getting the word out on the different types of activism that's available to you. Some things can be very, very time-consuming. They may seem much more like someone's daytime job as well, and some people may want to move away from that. Others may feel that because of their skill set, they want to do exactly that because they're going to have the biggest impact. During my years of working very long hours, I would do things like join in park cleanups, river bank cleanups along the Potomac. Those sorts of things give you an opportunity to be outside and to do something physical. You know, normally you're sitting behind a desk perhaps or at a computer. So for a number of years I did those sorts of volunteer activities, and then I got more into the the similar to work daytime job types of activities. But those are extremely rewarding as well because you actually see the change around you.
Right, and by that you mean more attending meetings and reading reports and that sort of the committee work.
That's right, committee work, sort of negotiating and marshaling support for certain things, the types of activities that you might do in your professional life.
And I understand you've also been involved to some extent in political campaigns locally. Can you talk about that a little bit? What maybe motivated you to get involved with those?
Oh, I think it is critically important to get involved in campaigns and supporting candidates. I think that this election you see a lot of energy around as we elect the new president. I believe that in a democracy, you have to be a full participant. You cannot complain about politicians or complain about policies if you're not in there and voicing your opinion, supporting your candidates, making your voice heard. That is essential. And you see around the world as new democracies are emerging and people get so energized to participate And I find it very frustrating that some Americans have become so jaded that they sit back and they don't even bother voting. It's very important that we do what we can and make certain that if things don't go our way, we know it isn't because we didn't try, or it isn't because we kept quiet.
Right. I agree with you. I think sometimes maybe the problem is a lot of the things you do as a political volunteer, or not even if it's for a candidate, let's say it's for an issue-oriented political campaign. For example, you spend a lot of time making phone calls.
Yes,
If you show up to volunteer, and I've done this, I show up to volunteer because I wanted to support either the party or I want to support the candidate. And you tell them maybe some of your background and things like that. And then the first thing they give you a long list, and you sit and you spend the whole day making phone calls. And a lot of people don't like to do that. And a lot of people don't like to get phone calls. So you have this, so that can be tough. But as you're saying, I think correctly, it's important to participate and make your voice heard and stand up for what you believe. So you've been able to find things that you like doing in political campaigns. I guess, is that fair to say?
I do. I have done the phone banking. It is not at the top of my list for things I enjoy doing. I've done a lot of leafletting, door to door. I've hosted house parties for candidates. I work at the polls. So, and that's something that it's easy to do. It's one day. So if someone is thinking that they want to try something out, that's a great way to get involved.
Yeah, I many years ago drove up to New Hampshire for the Democratic primary to volunteer at the polls, and it was a cold February day, and it was for Senator Tom Harkins, 1992. So Bill Clinton was on his way to winning the Democratic nomination, but I was out there for Harkin, and I had on about 4 pairs of long johns underneath what other lawyers looked like not very many clothes. And everyone else was very impressed. All the other candidates were very impressed by that, but didn't help us get any votes.
Well, just an anecdote. I, at another political party recently, actually, I met an Arlington couple who mentioned that they had gone on vacation to Vermont a couple of months ago. And while driving through a Vermont city, they saw a political office and stopped in to say hello and ended up spending hours phone banking to New Hampshire voters on their vacation in Vermont. So I thought that was so Arlington. So Arlington. You know?
That is so Arlington. That is so Arlington.
Yeah.
So what's next? You've done a lot.
Well.
Do you have any ideas of maybe issues you want to try or things you want to be involved in?
I do love urban planning. I think that my background of economics and political science as an undergrad made me very conscious of the impact of suburban sprawl on our country, on our culture, and on the environment. I think those two things, the cultural impact of people self-dividing themselves into like communities far from the urban core, and the devastating environmental impact of that same phenomenon made me very interested in the types of high-density, transit-oriented development in Arlington that we're so proud of. So tied to that, I also am very interested in transportation issues and environmental issues, and I might end up doing something more focused on one of those, but who knows?
But let me ask you this. You made a reference to your educational background, economics, political science. Mm-hmm. Were you getting, at the time, being educated, were you feeling, were you understanding the cultural impact, or do you feel like you understood it, or did you have to get out, live in a community, get involved, and then get a deeper understanding? Because I have I have 2 economics degrees, and I distinctly remember thinking, after I got the master's degree, I still really don't know why there's high unemployment, in this community or in this country, and this was 30 years ago. So did you feel like the education made a huge difference?
I think it did. I think certainly I knew from my studies how the country had changed in its development patterns over the last 50 years. I actually was much more into international affairs and international economics as an undergrad because I was interested in the economic interdependence impact on political stability worldwide. And that was the area that I wanted to go into. But somehow, when I graduated in 1982, remember that job market way back then?
No,
it's very similar to the job market today.
I did not realize you had. I graduated in 1982.
Oh, you did?
So yeah,
you
I do remember
did.
that.
Oh,
No,
yes.
See, I responded to that by going to graduate school and getting a master's in economics. So.
I responded to switching to health policy rather than international economic policy.
I think you made a better response. I'm regretting
well, that's
I'm
true,
regretting my
right?
entire career right now. So you think it made a difference because really the focus you were giving the economics at the time?
The economics and the political and cultural impact, I think. Studying how things had changed in the United States just over the past 100 years in terms of how people lived, where they lived, how they commuted, how family units worked. I think that that bringing people back into the cities, having them live in a much more diverse community is something that is healthy for all of us.
Right, right. So you are, it sounds like you're going to jump back into another transportation commission or Okay, I understand. You've had enough of the zoning ordinances. But there are still issues that you want to be engaged in.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So if you were going to give advice to high school students today about the community, what are some of the things you might say?
About the community?
Yeah, about their involvement in the community.
Well, let's see. I would say that if they live in Arlington, they are so lucky because it is such an open community. It is, we have so many ways to get involved and to learn about different types of issues. And based on my civic association experience, you just need to show up at a meeting and you are so welcomed and you can take on as much responsibility as you're willing to assume. But people are very interested in getting to know you and helping you understand the issues and giving you opportunities to witness various meetings. So that there are lots of ways to get involved, and there are lots of ways to start your own initiative as well. You don't have to simply join something else. If you have a particular interest in something, talk to people, talk to your teachers, talk to your neighbors, get ideas on how you might get something started, and you'd be surprised by the energy level of people in Arlington. You can really make things happen.
And I think it's important to emphasize, because you and your husband are proof of this, you can really get engaged in something that, it doesn't have to be something you have an advanced degree in. It doesn't have to be something you have to bring all this knowledge to. It's the showing up, it's the energy, it's the interest, and it's the passion you bring to the
Absolutely.
issues. Right.
Absolutely.
Well, Terry, thank you very much for coming on. I want to thank our volunteer crew here at Arlington Independent Media for helping us produce this program. They've been great. But most of all, I want to thank Terry for working so hard for so long to make your community a better place to live.
Thank
you
you
very much.